You know, when I first saw the trailer for SEC football any given Saturday, I was really excited but also very cautious about what to expect with this documentary. I knew it was going to be made for casual fans, and not for us hardcore fans, but it still was something that I love getting behind any sports documentary. But what I wasn't expecting is what we got out of this documentary. I thought it was going to be SEC propaganda left and right, but we didn't even get that. Instead, we got a boring slogfest of 7 episodes and a blown mismanagement and opportunity. This is my review on SEC football any given Saturday. But before we get into this, if you enjoy college football content like this, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Also, let me know how you would rate SEC football any given Saturday in the comment section below out of 10. So like I said already, heading into this documentary coming out today, I was really excited to see what was coming out, but I was also very cautious with what we might get. I love the Untold documentaries, but they always seem to be very surface level, and while they say they're going to be a deep dive, they never truly are a deep dive, and it leaves us hardcore fans wanting more. I've watched Drive to Survive. It's what got me into F1. I know that's a controversial take, as a lot of F1 fans don't like those who fall in love with Drive to Survive. But I'm going to be honest, over the past 2 years, I really haven't watched Drive to Survive because I felt like the quality has dropped off completely. And then I've watched Last Chance U, which I love, but the basketball and football seasons, I've talked about the football seasons on this channel before, and I just finished watching WWE Unreal, which was a behind the curtain look into WWE. So I love these sports documentaries, and they're usually the first thing I turn on. So I was really excited for this SEC documentary. I mean, WWE Unreal actually, sad to admit, brought me to tears with the CM Punk episode for WrestleMania. But like I said, most of these documentaries are usually made for casual fans, not for the hardcore fans, to bring new fans in to enjoy the sport. So I thought this was going to be a cash grab by the SEC to bring in that casual fan, make them watch SEC football, and help them get a bigger television deal down the road. Even though I hoped for a grittier show like Last Chance U, but it just wasn't what I was expecting. But heading into this series, just so you know, there's no Alabama, Oklahoma, Georgia, Texas, or Ole Miss, and there's like 5 minutes of Tennessee in the last episode, and like 5 to 10 minutes of Kentucky in the last episode. It was mainly the teams that didn't make the college football playoffs that let them in to record their season. So let's talk about an episode by episode review. And to be honest, I'm not really going to cover episode 7 because I had to stop just to be able to do this video, but I feel like I could get my point across through the first 6 episodes. Episode 1 just was so freaking boring, and it really pushed my narrative of I really don't care for Brian Kelly. I always felt like he was a politician and a car salesman, but to learn he actually comes from a political family, and his dad was a politician and he worked on presidential campaigns, it now all makes sense. And I find it funny how Netflix and those involved with the documentary changed the narrative for the end of the Ed Ogeron saga in LSU and made it seem like it just wasn't failing at football, and then he got fired after 2 years because he was struggling on the field, and they left out all the background stuff. But the SEC wants to set a certain message, and so does LSU and all the other schools. And I have a theory that I'm going to talk about after I talk about episode 2 about what we got. But they used the most ESPN line by an SEC network reporter saying 10-3 records don't cut it at LSU. I mean, it's the cheesiest line we get from every SEC school. This record doesn't cut it here. Okay, we get it. I mean, everybody knows that. But just doesn't mean you need to throw it down their throat. But the LSU stuff was just really hard to watch and really boring for the first half of the episode. They then switch over to South Carolina, and when comparing and contrasting the way Brian Kelly is on this show versus the way Shane Beamer is on this show, it's just a wild comparison. Because Shane Beamer feels way more like a normal person in this, really real in this documentary, talking about possibly getting fired, his struggles, all that stuff, being the son of a coach. And it didn't feel like he was trying to do his media training by the book, the way Brian Kelly was trying to do media training by the book when going on this documentary. But although it's an hour episode, it felt like they really didn't talk about much and they didn't really cover much, and that there was just so much filler in the episode. Why are the reporters brought in? They don't say anything. It felt like they were brought in just to say lines for the trailer in this first episode. It was just boring, and I mean, they even go over and cover the LSU versus South Carolina game, and they managed to make the highlights boring, even though it was like 2 minutes of an hour episode. It still was just so boring. Like, I'm sitting there texting my friends, I'm like, guys, this isn't bad, this isn't good, it's just boring. And then you go into episode 2, which is on Florida. And the Florida stuff should write itself. It should be this really exciting, crazy episode, especially when you remember back to what was going on with Billy Napier, the quarterback controversy between Graham Mertz and DJ Lagway. But again, it's just a boring episode. For example, Graham Mertz has an amazing story to get to Florida, but they don't cover his huge first game at Wisconsin, the crazy expectations that come from that, and how he ended up at Florida, which if they did, you'd be rooting harder for Graham Mertz and his later injury in the or his 2 injuries last season. You'd want to root for him more if you're the casual fan, because you might have not watched the season and you're trying to get it ready for college football. When it comes to the talking about Billy Napier, when he was hired, was the hottest coach on the coaching market at Louisiana, and they don't hype it up that much. They just, like, if they did hype him up and build him up, like talking about his previous experience at Louisiana and his coaching career, it'd be like, wow, why hasn't this worked at Florida, instead of, oh, he's just about to get fired. There was so much filler, but when it came to the important stuff in this episode, they kind of rushed through it and didn't even make you care. They downplayed how serious the Billy Napier firing situation was. They didn't show highlights of Florida being dominated by Kentucky the past 2 years. They just told you, they didn't show you. There's this beautiful, masterful thing you want to do, show, not tell type of deal. And the interview with the reporters were so basic. I was seriously thinking at this time, were these just AI generated and the people just signed off on letting them use their likeness? But at the same time, the quality of these first 2 episodes were not that shocking to see how Drive to Survive has gone downhill over the past few years. Because they didn't build up the Napier story well enough, or the DJ Lagway and Graham Mertz quarterback battle, and just had so much filler in it, it doesn't feel so gratifying when things turn around later in the season, and they just show this quickly run through, oh, Florida finds success, Billy Napier hangs on, and done. And it's the last thing you see of Florida. As I was sitting there, when you get to the Vanderbilt episode, things kind of really change. As I'm sitting there, I'm like wondering, oh, did LSU and Florida really like try to be brand protected and like really kept it to media training and not letting this affect their brand, even though by showing what truly goes on is a better recruiting tool, because it's like, oh no, this is how good our coaches are. They could get you to buy in even when we're struggling. I felt like there was like a lot of brand protection involved in it. And the docuseries is better if you don't even have Florida or LSU in. And then we move to episode 3, which I think is the best episode in the series. And I think there's a jump in quality from episode 3 to 5 that I think you skip episode 1 and 2 because it was a waste of 2 hours of my life, to be honest with you. And for the first time in the series, they make you care and add historical context into everything going on. It actually gets you emotionally invested and sets up something crazy that happens in this episode. I don't want to spoil the episodes, even though we already know what happens if you're watching this channel. But it felt so special. They build Diego Pavia up in a way they should have done for Graham Mertz and the other quarterbacks I have written in my notes. They should have built up. They cover his backstory, and this is what I was expecting out of the series. At least with the Vanderbilt stuff, it felt like anything was on the table and we could talk about anything. And the reporters are actually adding something to the episode. It doesn't feel like they're just saying one-liners for the trailer. They are actually saying high-quality things and building up the context of why what Vanderbilt goes on to do last season makes it so special. They built tension throughout the highlights. in both the Arkansas game and the Vanderbilt game for the first time, and I'm like on the edge of my seat. Even though I know what happens, I'm still on the edge of my seat, excited, even as a hardcore football fan. There's one line where they talk about one player, and then the next thing you know, he's getting hurt. And it was kind of like a show not tell type of deal. Like, oh my God, could you imagine if this team loses this player? Their season's all over. Like, this crushed them. When instead they do a coaching line of, as long as we have this player, we could win any game. And then said player gets hurt. And it just made it they're very alike in the way it gets done. But the feeling that goes with it just brings it to the next, like, another level. Clark Lee doesn't care about the cameras, and I love it, is what I have written in my notes. He's just himself. And you finally feel the big moments in this episode. Like, it feels special. It shows how special college football is, where the first 2 episodes couldn't. And then you go back down a level where the Auburn LSU episode, we do get historical context talking about Auburn and why when things are good, they're good, and when they're bad, they're bad. And it had me wondering, why didn't we do this for Florida? Because you could say the same thing. It creates stakes for what you're about to watch in the episode. But yet again, they don't cover the career of Peyton Thorne, how he led Michigan State to a major bowl win and then left and now ended up at Auburn. They just say, oh, Thorne's had a crazy career. Now he's here in his senior year of college. And it left so much on the table of possibility. And then when they came, my favorite part of this episode was the Garrett Nussmeier stuff of the behind the scenes of what a player's going through and making an NFL draft decision. The only reason I think this episode was good was because of the Nussmeier stuff. I just don't care about Auburn in this episode. I don't care about LSU's season. I just care about Nuss's decision and seeing the human side of it and why his best friend's trying to talk him into staying at LSU. And it just feels so special. I think the craziest thing we learned through this all is Brian Kelly has the same agent as a lot of his players, and how is that allowed in any sort of way? Episode 5 is another great episode where it's South Carolina and Vanderbilt, and it both make the games feel so exciting. When the episode focuses more on the games themselves, they are way better. I just felt when Vanderbilt was on the screen, it felt more like the special sauce that Last Chance U had, and it's kind of that underdog story of finding success. It's also just how they build it up and how there's no punches being held back when talking about these schools. There's no brand protection or nothing, just, hey, Vanderbilt's not been great for a long time, and given the historical context and why Clark Lee wants to bring them back, it makes you care. And it was nice also seeing Shane Beamer's family involved in this, as they talk about how hard it is being on the family side of the job that a lot of us don't really think about, and how getting better info on Auburn in a Vandy episode than the Auburn episode was a crazy thing I have written in my notes. And the last thing I have written in my notes in this episode 5, I know there's been a lot of negativity, but it's just, I had hopes for this. Not high hopes, just regular hopes that it'd be entertaining. But why do we wait till episode 5 to show Sandstorm at South Carolina when I think that's a golden opportunity to show the college football tradition right at the beginning of the series, especially if you're going to have South Carolina in episode 1. Instead, you had a 56-minute boring episode in episode 1. So, episode 5 was good, not as great as episode 3, but I think it's probably the second best episode. And then we go to episode 6, and it's just, while we get the history of the cowbell, which was nice, why not go into more details about the 3 previous coaches at Mississippi State? And there's no mention of how special that 2014 team was. They rushed through the history of the Egg Bowl. It was nice bringing in Johnny Football for the Texas A&M side of things. And I like that they slightly addressed the failure of Jimbo Fisher and how you can't buy a roster in college football. But again, there was the foundation to do great things, and then they just moved on. And then in the Tennessee episode, in episode 7, I paused the episode once they moved to South Carolina. They spend 5 minutes on it talking about the college football playoffs, and the majority of that time is specifically talking about how the college football playoffs are selected. Like, what are we doing? There's no college football special. And it's why I'm like really disappointed with this documentary. College football has so much tradition, so much history, so much to go into it that just gets thrown to the wayside. Yes, the NFL and professional sports have it, but they don't have that special sauce college football has. And if you want to bring in the casual fan and make them care, you need to show off that special sauce, the crazy traditions, and not just glance over them. Give context, give historical context. There was really, other than the Alabama-LSU rivalry, there was no talk about college football rivalries really at all in the whole documentary. And it was a blown opportunity because that's also what makes college football so special. There's still this hatred of your rival, unlike in professional sports these days. They left so much on the table, and I'm sorry this is more of a rant than anything else, but it's just my personal review. And I just want to say, if you're going to watch this series, watch episode 3 through 5, and don't waste your time with episode 1, 2, 6, and 7. Unless you're a fan of LSU, South Carolina, Florida. I mean, Florida didn't, even as a Florida fan, if you're a Florida fan, you're really not going to care about episode 2, other than maybe the DJ Lagway stuff of seeing how cool of a guy he is. But then Mississippi State, Texas A&M in episode 6. Kentucky gets embarrassed in episode 7. Like, it's just, if I had to rate the Stocky series from a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give it a 4 or 5. It was going to be a 3 up until episode 3 and 5. But I just don't care. And I feel like I wasted my afternoon watching this. And that's not what you should get out of a sports documentary series, especially a college football one. And I think when looking at what the special sauce was in episode 3, one, I wonder if there were different producers for each of the episodes. But I think if you did this for the group of 5 level, it'd be way better because there wouldn't be this protection of the brand, more of a Last Chance U vibe of, hey, we're the group of 5, we're fighting for everything. This is why you should care. And that's what's so special about sports. That's just my thoughts. How do you feel about SEC football any given Saturday? Let me know in the comment section below your scale 1 to 10, how you felt about it. Am I being too harsh? Did I have too high of expectations? I'm curious. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out one of my other videos, YouTube Things You Will Love, right here. And as always, remember to embrace the grind.